Good morning, everybody. It's 8:40. So it's 8:40, and there is. Okay. So welcome to the second day of the GamaDays. I can see that our first presenter is already here. Hi, Jean. The second one just arrived, and the last one I cannot see her for the moment. She will arrive. Perhaps just a reminder before we start this this first session of the day. Okay, we have our last presenter for this morning. Perfect on time. So we have again a very strong and very dense program for today, with mainly agriculture and ecology to start the morning in France, of course. Then we continue with transportation and mobility. Don't forget, at 1 p.m. French time, we'll have the first roundtable about can we trust the model, with Bruce Edmonds, Pablo Jensen, and Pascal Perez, with the moderator, and Frédéric Cambla will be the moderator. And we will continue the day with transportation and mobility, 2 sessions, and the new feature of Gamma, in particular focusing on agent behavior. Yesterday, there were several discussions about, in particular, the ocean model about personality. So I think it would be discussed more during this session. Okay, it's my great pleasure to be the moderator of this first session of the day. We will have 3 presentations this morning during this session, all related to ecology and agriculture. With Jean Villers will start, then Renaud Misselin, and we'll finish with Jay Newman, sorry for the pronunciation. So Jean Villers will present the challenge for integrated assessment modeling of the socio-agroecological system during 20 minutes. So, Jean.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. We can hear you. We can see your slide. We are great.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Jean Villers. I'm from INRAE. And I will talk about challenges for integrated assessment modeling of socio-agroecological systems through our experience of in developing the MAELIA model, which is headed by Olivier Théron. So what was the purpose of the MAELIA model? It was to provide a tool for ex-ante assessment of landscapes. So ex-ante assessment means testing what-if scenarios from compared to a current situation. So what we need is to start with a current situation, a current landscape configuration, to simulate to simulate through a model some processes and interaction between processes that provide a set of indicators that are suitable for decision making. And we should also be able to test what if scenario by transforming the current situation. So for instance, what if a dam is built here, and do the same thing, simulate and observe the effects on the indicators. So in order to build such a tool, we need to integrate interaction between ecological processes that evolve at the landscape scale, and also to represent multiple actors with contrasting objectives that evolve also in the landscape scale. And Ostrom proposed a conceptual framework for representing landscape, such a landscape integrating assessment. It's called socio-ecological systems. So a socio-ecological system represents a system made of 4 main different types of entities. Can you see my mouse? No?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So resource units. So here, natural resources such as water, users, typically farmers, resource system that are, because resource units are part of a more general system, and governance system that drive all the governance and policies into the system. And finally, what we observe is the interactions between all these entities, and the indicators that we want to observe, and for which we want to see the impacts of different scenarios, are the outcomes. So if I take an example, in the water crisis context, the resource units are water resources that are part of an hydrological system, because water resources are in a system with runoff, rainfall, and so on. The users are the farmers that irrigate their fields, and the governance system represents the water resource management that can act as by making restrictions over water resources. And finally, all these entities interact, and the observed withdrawals for agriculture are the result of interactions between all these entities. And the outcomes may be the number of water crises, the magnitude of these water crises. So in MAELIA, we try to implement such a socio-ecological system as an agent-based model in Gamma. So we can see that agent-based modeling is suitable for representing socio-ecological systems because, as you all know, agent-based modeling are good for representing emergent properties. And we can see that we saw that interactions between all the entities of the socio-ecological models are such kind of emergent properties. So in MAELIA, the agents are the farmers and the prefect that can make restrictions on water withdrawal. And of course, we have to many ecological processes to represent all these processes at the landscape scale. So if I take one field of the landscape, this field belongs to a farmer. A farmer has a first process that is to make decisions about his agricultural practices. One important decision to make is to choose a cropping plan, which cropping rotation, which cropping crop sequence he wants to make on his field. And on a daily basis, he also have to make decisions about which agricultural practice to perform on his field, such as sowing, harvest, tillage, irrigation. So we have to MAELIA to represent such a decision-making process. We also have to represent biophysical processes, such as the crop growth. On a field, plants, of course, grow in interaction with soil, climate, water, and so on. So we need a model to, on a daily basis, make plants grow. And of course, it depends on the species of the crop. It depends on the nature of the soil and so on. And we also need a third basic process to be represented, the hydrological system, because of course the cropping model that make the crop grow need to know the state of the water in the field. So we also have to we also need a model that represents the hydrological system. And this is we can see here the interaction between the water resource that is here, that can be a river, a hillside reservoir, or a groundwater table. The governance policy and the user inside a socio-ecological system. And of course, we have plenty of such farmers in the landscape. So a use case of MAELIA, it's for representing the water crisis in a watershed in the southern west of France. So here the landscape was made of about 15,000 fields. And in this region, there are many water crises linked to the irrigation of agricultural fields. So how can MAELIA help in this case? The idea is to first develop a reference model that is to represent the current situation. And of course, we need a lot of data for that. We need data about the soil, about the rivers, about the agricultural practices. We will see more on that later. But when we have current state of the landscape, then we exchange with participants that are stakeholders, and they express the scenarios. So they say, so at first they make boundaries. This, we will not change this, but we could change this at a certain level. And so they define some alternative visions that are the scenarios. Then we implement these scenarios into MAELIA. That means that we transform the data that represent the current situation to integrate the variations of the scenarios. And of course, we run the simulations. So for instance, here, the two alternatives were to sow earlier in the the maize earlier in the year, because maize is of course one of the crops that need a lot of water. Or another alternative was to stop a monocropping of maize near small affluents. And so these alternatives are represented here. And then MAELIA simulates these alternatives. So for a long period of time in order to test the robustness to climate variability. And of course, we need to define which indicators we want to look at for assessing if the alternative is better or worse than the current situation. So in this case, we looked at, of course, biophysical indicators that in order to see if the water levels were improved by the alternative, but also socioeconomic indicators, for instance, crop yields, and farm gross margins, because we don't want a solution that will make farmers lose a lot of money. Of course, it must be realistic. So here there's a part of multi-criteria analysis by looking at several kind of indicators. Okay, so this is how MAELIA works and how MAELIA can be used. Now the challenges around the modeling of socio-ecological systems. One of our big challenge is to prevent MAELIA from becoming an integrant when integrating more and more processes and thus more and more submodels. So integrant, it's a term coined by Voinov and Shugart in a famous paper. And so basically it represents construct that is perfectly valid as a software product, but useless as a model because it has become over complex. And even if it works as a software, it's intractable as a model. And another way to say that is to
Jean, sorry, you mute off your mic. Okay, thank
sorry.
you.
It's okay?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. And it says that the more and more we integrate new processes, the more and more we are close to reality. But the more and more we add, of course, complexity, new parameters, and so on. And finally, the more and more the model becomes uncertain. So there is a kind of parallel with the bias variance trade-off in machine learning. The more and more the model becomes complex, the more and more the bias is improved, but the more and more the variance grows. What should be our strategy for model integration if we don't want MAELIA to become an integrant and something too complex to deal with? In their paper, Voinov and Shugart propose two strategies for model integration. The first is called assemblage. It means taking new submodels as building blocks, as independent software component, and basically it means loose coupling. So calling the new model as a building block. So it's kind of software driven. Of course, it's easier for calibration because we can calibrate the submodel independently. The submodel is maintained by the people who implemented it, so it's maintenance external, but it doesn't share the conceptual framework of, for instance, MAELIA. And maybe there are some mismatches between spatiotemporal scales and other parameters between the two models. The other strategy is integral. It means that some models are interwoven into a common representation, a common conceptual framework. So here it's tight coupling, and even worse, it's actually re-implementing the models. Here it's more conceptual model driven rather than software driven. And it's, of course, very in contradiction with what we learn in software engineering, where I have learned that the coupling should be as loose as possible. So here it's in favor of tight coupling, and the main advantage is that the conceptual framework is maintained consistent for all submodels. In the model, we can select what part of the submodels we implement if we don't need the whole submodel. And of course, by doing this, we acquire a deep understanding of the model. Of course, there are many drawbacks. It builds some kind of ad hoc solution. It's difficult to calibrate because it's maybe not easy to separate the submodel when it's integrated. And of course, we need to maintain the code. So that is this strategy has been used for SWAT because we didn't need the whole parts of SWAT in MAELIA, and also for AKILD, which is the crop model implemented in in MAELIA, so it has been re-implemented in GamaDays. And sorry, SWAT is the model for the hydrological model that we use in MAELIA. And there has been a proposition of a meta model for representing socio-ecological systems. So this is the reference, and this paper describes the shared conceptual framework that is used in MAELIA to incorporate, to integrate new submodels. Another challenge is to represent the management of cropping systems and agricultural practices. So as I said before, there are two main decision process for the farmer. The first is to choose the crop sequence that he will apply on his field. And so in MAELIA, we have two solutions for that. The first is to use belief, desire, intention architecture that was implemented in the very early development of MAELIA. And so the simulated sequence on the field is a result of the farmer's decision-making process that has been made explicit through the BDI architecture. And the other way of specifying the crop sequences are to force these crop sequences from data, actually from anonymized CIP data. So here the farmer decision-making process is hidden, is unknown, is implicit, but we implement the results of this hidden decision-making model. And this is what is actually used in most of the use cases. The other decision-making process of the agriculture is how he triggers his agricultural practices. In MAELIA, it's through if-then rules. So if the current crop is rapeseed, we have some rules for sowing, for harvest, for fertilization. And for instance, for barley sowing, we first check a time window. If we are in the time window for sowing barley, then we look if we have a threshold and cumulative rainfall. And we have another threshold and temperature, and so on. We can add constraints. And then if everything is okay, we can trigger the sowing on the field. Of course, it's very costly to collect these decision rules because we have to ask experts or farmers, and a great challenge will be to infer these decision rules from those data that can be found from captors or information systems and so on. Very quickly, so as a conclusion, the two main challenges are the fact that MAELIA is becoming more and more complex by adding more and more processes and more models. And the other is to how to take advantage of the big data linked to agricultural practices in order to infer decision rules. And you will have more on MAELIA in the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean. Okay, just a reminder for everybody, don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat right now, in the chat on the Zoom or in the Slack chat. We will gather all the questions and save them for the discussion session we'll have after the 3 presentations. So thank you, Jean. We'll come back to you with questions after the other presentation. We continue with another presentation about a gamma model from Renaud Misselin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. So this presentation will be more focused on the management of organic resources in the MAELIA model.
Yes. So,
excuse me, just before you start, could you perhaps have a full screen of your slide? Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to present a new MAELIA module and a case study that we developed to answer questions regarding the territorial management of organic resources. So there is a wide diversity of fertilizers and practices. For fertilizers, you have mineral fertilizers and organic fertilizers, such as manure or urban sludges. And these fertilizers are used through a very wide diversity of practices that are adjusted to cropping systems, which can be coupled crop livestock systems producing manure, or which can be included in urban waste spreading pens. These practices have multiple and intricate impacts, environmental impacts such as greenhouse gases emissions or soil health, economic impacts such on yields and on gross margins, and social and sanitary impacts such as the impact of farmer workload and ammonia emissions. So the organic resources management is a multi-level challenge that goes from the field to the territory. At the field level, that's where fertilization strategies are thought and performed according to the cropping system and the available organic resources. At the farm level, that's where organic resources are managed by farmers according to the workload that they demand. And at the territory level, that's where that's the level at which stakeholders can assess the social and environmental impacts of the practices and take specific decisions according to the result of the assessment. So our question that we wanted to address developing this new model was the following one: how to assess the multiple effects of fertilization practices from field to territory. So I'm gonna skip this part because Jean just talked about that. So it's a new module of MAELIA which is implemented on the Gamma platform. As Jean said, MAELIA needs a lot of input data, different input data, such as the plots, the crop rotations, agricultural, very fine descriptions of agricultural practices, and the agri-system, the pedological data, the soil characteristics, and so here, the road network, the organic resources, processes, location, and the administrative boundaries and the population is not used, as well as the forest. But we are using a specific set of data that describes the organic resource, the amount of organic resources that is produced annually in the territory. This slide describes the decision rules that Jean just talked about. So I'm not gonna enter in details here. Just know that for fertilization, one specific decision rule is the following one: is can I access the organic resource that I need? And it's very specific for the fertilization part, because farmers are in competition over the supply in the model. So, so here you have three farmer agents. The farmer agent A uses only mineral fertilization, which is considered in unlimited supply. But farmer agent B and farmer agent C both use urban sludges. So they are in competition over this organic resource. And if the farmer agent B empty the supply of urban sledges, then the farmer agent C won't be able to access the supply, and it will fall back on a different strategy. And every farmers that use organic resources have different fertilization strategies that are ordered from the favorite one to the least favorite one. For the outputs now, so outputs can be extracted for each individual plot, and you can extract, for example, gaseous emissions such as greenhouse gases or ammonia, things regarding the workloads, the costs of the fertilization practices, the nitrate leaching, and a wide diversity of indicators regarding the organic matter cycle that is simulated on a daily time step in the fertilization, the objective is to think fertilization strategies at the territorial scale, and at this scale we will be implementing governance scenarios. And the one I'm going to talk about today is the second one here. It's how to maximize, what would be the effect of maximizing organic resources use within territorial limits. That means that we will look at all the organic resources that are produced in a territory and that will be used in the fields which are in the territory. So then we perform territorial simulations and we assess the scenarios through a set of indicators that I already talked about. So our case study is in the Versailles Plain, which is located just nearby Paris. It has 167 farms, more than 2,000 fields, and more than 11,000 hectares of utilized agricultural area. I'm not going to enter in detail of the well, I'm going to present the result of at each scale that can be used in MAELIA. So this is the field scale, at which results can be extracted on a daily time step. So here you can see plants growing from sowing to harvest. The water in available water content for the plant in topsoil decreasing when the plant is growing, and the mineral nitrogen available for the plant that is going up whenever fertilization practice is performed, and going down following the plant uptakes, nitrogen uptakes. And here the nitrate etching that occur mainly during the time of the year where there is no plant cover. These results can be viewed on at the territory scale, and at this scale, these kind of maps can be generated and can be used by stakeholders to see where to see wherever where specific problems such as nitrate etching can occur, and where they are more important than in other places.
Bruno,
And,
I'm sorry, I will have to ask you to go to the conclusion.
Okay, so here are the three fertilization scenarios that we views, a mineral scenario, a current practice scenario, and a potential scenario within territorial limits. And in perspective, so now well, I'm just going to present this part. We want to integrate an we want to do an integrated assessment of biomass fluxes at the territorial scale, and that means implementing an organic resource chain model, simulating production, transformation, and soil return, which is what I presented today. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for the time.
Thank you very much, and sorry for having to interrupt you. We'll have time to go back to your subject, to your presentation during the question. The last one will be Jay Newman, if I pronounce correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
so you will present your work about does memory help optimize fruit fly foraging in local heterogeneous landscape?
Thank you.
So the ground is the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, I'm Jay Newman, and I'm a PhD student from the Queensland University of Technology in Australia, if you didn't know where that was. And my industry partner is Cyro, and my scholarship is from the Centre for Fruit Fly Biosecurity Innovation. So the goal during my PhD was to build a mechanistic foraging model of Bactrossera trianae, focusing on resource host use and population dynamics in heterogeneous landscapes. So Queensland fruit fly is a major pest, costing Australia $300 million a year in lost trade. This is due to its prolificous nature. It can infest over 200 fruit and vegetable species, and the quality of the fruit host is thought to be a main driver of population dynamics. And yet, the role of host quality is often minimized or absent in Queensland fruit fly population models. So generally, when landscapes are modeled, they use deterministic models using a single fruit host. The problem with this is that these flies are mobile and they move between trees and patches, and hence come across varying qualities of hosts in the environment. Also, the environment changes both spatially and temporally. Where in the landscapes are trees fruiting and when? Then there are behaviors of individual flies. When they come across these different fruit hosts, they make a decision whether or not to lay eggs. And this depends on past experience, and also if that fruit is already infested with larvae. So these decisions in which fruit to lay eggs have flow-on effects on the population dynamics in a local landscape. So this is where the memory kind of comes into it. So another member of my lab group, Dr. Rehan Silva, was working on experience and memory behavior of Queensland fruit fly. And so I've incorporated his novel findings into the model. So essentially what happens is these flies remember laying eggs into a fruit, and this overrides their innate optimal fruit host ranking ability, as they prefer to move to a host that they have experienced, even if there's a better fruit available. So we generally hypothesize, because of this memory, that the memory influences host use in a landscape, and this then impacts on population dynamics. So we've done some in silico experiments with and without memory in the local landscape. So this is the conceptual model. So we've got three major agent types. We've got flies, cohorts, and trees. It is a daily time step, which runs for 5 years. So the larvae in which the adult developed affects the adult's daily mortality and fecundity. And I've made a couple of functions to represent what happens depending on their larval development, depending on those hosts. So I have simplified laboratory data for survival and fecundity. And then there are the behaviors of the flies. So a fly moves to a fruiting tree within a foraging radius, and it chooses the best host, the best fruit type within that radius. It then detects if there are larvae within that fruit, and then there is a probability of whether or not they lay eggs. And this is the last step of the day for the fly. And then there are cohort agents. So it's the juveniles, so the egg state, larvae state, pupal state, and an emerge state. And essentially it's just a number. So this cohort number is calculated by the number of eggs that each fly has within a tree on that day. And then those cohorts move through at the same development rate. So they have a development rate and a mortality probability, and this depends on that fruit host that they're within. And when they get to the emerge state, because of that mortality, that cohort number has decreased over time, and the remaining number within that cohort is then turned into individual fly agents. Then there's the landscape. We've got 4 tree types, good, average, and poor, and they have those quality hosts. A cell is a 5 by 5 meter tree, and I can change the proportion and aggregation, and it's in a continuous landscape. And they have a larval capacity, which is a carrying capacity for the model. So the optimal foraging, so these flies have an innate host ranking ability where they go to the best host first, but they also can detect larvae within a fruit. So if it's a poor host and they land on that tree, then, and the fruit is infested, they won't lay eggs. Whereas if it's a good host, they will lay eggs even if the fruit is infested. Then there's the memory component that I was talking about. So memory overrides this innate ability to optimally forage. So essentially, have they experienced a fruit? If no, then they use that optimal foraging and they go to the best fruit, and then they remember that fruit the next day. If they have experienced a fruit, then they have a probability to go back to that fruit type that's within their foraging radius. And that probability depends on whether the host was a good, poor, or average quality. And as you can see here, if the fly experienced, say, a poor host, then the next day it's much more likely to go towards that poor host. Whereas if they move into the environment and there's a non-host, then they forget about that host. And so that memory is reset. But it takes a lot longer for if they've experienced a good host. So there are assumptions in this model. So it assumes an ideal environment condition. So temperature is perfect and moisture is perfect, along with others. That the populations are driven by the fruit host quality in the environment. And it only looks at females because that's what really drives the population. And there's only 3 fruit types because I've kept it as simple as possible. And they bear fruit at the same time, though I can add seasonality. So back to this question, does memory help optimize fruit fly foraging at the landscape level? So these hypotheses, memory results in relatively low populations affiliated with poorer hosts. And with increasing aggregation of hosts, the effect of memory is more distinct. And these are some preliminary results that we've got. So as you can see, this is % time spent in each host over the simulations. And this is the memory. So this false is without memory, and this true is with that memory. So we've compared those scenarios, those different behaviors. And so when it's false with this optimal foraging, you can see it doesn't spend as much time in the poor and average quality fruit host as the good hosts. And when the memory is included, it does actually spend a bit more time in the poor and average host and less time in the good host. And as a result, the average daily flies, so the population, is lower with in the scenarios with the memory. So this is what we expected. Then there's the aggregation effect. So we included some different landscapes. So what you can see here is average daily flies and landscape aggregation with memory in blue and without memory in false. So this optimal foraging, as you can see, is greater in the lower aggregated landscapes, but then it looks as though it's kind of declining, although there's a lot of overlap there, and I have to really dig in to see what's happening. And when they have memory, it's more distinct when the aggregation is less. So this is not exactly what we expected. So I'm going to really look into this a lot closer and see what's going on. But it's an interesting result. So yeah, memory does result in lower populations due to that poor host affiliation. But then with increasing aggregation, the memory effect appears to be reducing. So yeah, it's something that's kind of interesting. So yeah, I need to look at the model further and do some statistical analysis. And but yeah, preliminary results, which are kind of exciting. But yeah, I'd like to make it a little bit more predictable because it's just a fun toy model at the moment. So I could include temperature and moisture and things. I could also include seasonality and also some management techniques like trap cropping and removal of feral trees, just to see what happens to the populations as well. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. So thank you for a great presentation. I was very happy to hear your work after answering and exchanging some message on the mailing list.
Yes, it's been really great.
So for everybody, don't hesitate to ask a question in the chat or after that to raise your hand. For this time, perhaps I will start with question to Jay, because I saw some questions for Jean and Renaud, which are perhaps more general. So Jay, what formula of memory decay did you use from Olivia?
Yeah. So this was based on the laboratory work that one of my lab colleagues collected. So it's actually a table of data with the daily decay, but I can put that into a function. But at the moment, it's just a table.
Table from real data or
from real data, yeah.
So from Alexis Drogoul, what is the size of the population you are simulating?
Oh, for me?
Oh yeah, again, yeah.
Oh yeah, again, yeah. So I've got a carrying capacity in the model. So and that carrying capacity is based on the max larvae that can be obtained in each fruit in each tree. And so currently it's about 7,000 odd, because yeah, I need to figure out how to get onto the HPC. So it takes a long time for my models to run.
So you said 7,000 like agents?
Individual agents, yeah, of the flies.
And the landscape?
The landscape is I think it's a 20 by 20 grid.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a fairly small landscape, but it's a torus, so it's meant to kind of, be a continuous landscape.
And another question from a presenter. when a fly experiences a poor host, does it lower the probability of return?
So if it's a poor host, the following day, it's about 76% that it will return back to that poor host the next day.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will have to scroll up in the chat to, there was also a question about for Jean and Renaud. So first of all, perhaps as introduction, I could say on the MAELIA model that if Gamma has 14 years, MAELIA is about 10 years now, and there is a co-evolution between Gamma and MAELIA, and both of them shape the other. And in particular, with these 10 years of development, MAELIA has become very complex. And Patrick is asking, in particular to Jean, if you have some plan to help new modelers to use it for their own case study. And what does it cost to implement new feature?
Yeah. I will say that when someone wants to add a new feature in MAELIA, the strategy is to go on with him in co-constructing his new feature into MAELIA. So basically, it never happened, but I don't think it will be practical for someone to add a new feature in MAELIA without the help of the MAELIA team. And so using this strategy, there are two possibilities. The first is that it's a new feature from scratch. So then we work with the new modeler to identify how his new feature will integrate what I've called the conceptual framework of MAELIA in order to keep the whole thing consistent. And if it's integrating another existing model, we also work with the modeler to first identify which part of his model will be integrated and where it will be integrated in MAELIA. So we have an example for that. It's the UPTUC model for representing metanisers and so on, and it's a model from CIRAD and from Jean-Christophe Soulier. And so the colleague, we work with him, he re-implemented his part of his model in Gamma, and then we connected it with MAELIA. So the strategy is to make the work together with the person of the new feature and the new model.
And perhaps I could give the floor to Renaud and ask the same question, but if I'm right, on the other side, because you had to integrate perhaps a new model in MAELIA. So what is your experience on that part? Was it easy?
So as Jean said, MAELIA is very complicated. So whenever I had, so my job when I joined the MAELIA team was to implement the new module, and so I had a time of a few months I spent a few months just looking at MAELIA and trying to understand what does what, because before I could implement the module and connect the module to the rest of the model. So yeah, but then when you understand the structure, it's relatively easy. So yeah, whenever someone wants to implement a new feature, as Jean said, it cannot be done without the help of the MAELIA team.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, it starts to be very, very complex. And perhaps the other question was when you integrate a new model, so it could be yours, what is the strategy to ensure the consistency of the whole MAELIA framework, but also of the result you have in your additional module? So I don't know, perhaps to Jean first, how do you ensure this consistency at the scale of the MAELIA? So,
the consistency of when we add new models?
yeah, basically, perhaps you had small pieces and it broke everything. So how to ensure to not having that?
Yeah, we try to we define benchmarks, and for which we know that the whole thing works, and so when we add when we implement a new feature, we compare if it still performs well on the benchmark.
Okay, so you have like some unit tests to ensure this consistency.
Yeah, it's not as we should have more unit tests than what exists now, but yes, that the strategy is.
And perhaps for Renaud, on the other side, on the one we integrate the model, do you have some specific strategy to ensure that the results you get in this big structure are still consistent or correct?
Yeah, I would add to Jean's answer that Jean talked about the computing point of view, and on the thematic point of view, you have to ensure that the model that you want to implement is coherent with the rest of the model, and that's a big part of the job, an important part of the job, because it requires a wide view. It requires well, knowledge and insight on agriculture, on hydrosystems, on carbon and nitrogen cycle, on well, a very wide diversity of different thematics. So this can be, so here we have Olivier Théron, which is the head of the MAELIA project, that he has all these, well, he is heading the project and
this expertise,
knowledge, yes. But it's very difficult for one person when, well, as you said, the model is becoming very big, and so it's even more difficult for one person to know what's in the model.
Okay. Just a few more words on that. I think that that's why the conceptual part of the model integration is very important, and I think that it's at this part that problems may be identified and solved, and that's also why I think that it's better to follow the integral part, even it's more tight coupling, than the assemblage strategy, because if you have a deep understanding of the new model, then you may prevent some many problems of interpreting the results later. And so I think that model integration is more than software coupling.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm already late, my bad. Many questions that could be still asked in the Slack, on the Slack. And now I give the floor to Alexis for the second session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So yes, 4 minutes left. It's really, well, okay. I won't tell anything, but you know what I'm thinking. So I'm very happy to moderate a new session on ecology and agriculture. And we will have 4 presentations. The first one being by Mehdi Sakari about landscape, vegetation, and resources modeling, reconstituting the pre-Neolithic Roussillon territory in France. So I'm, well, first very interested by the subject itself and very happy to see Mehdi after a long time. We haven't seen each other. So Mehdi, are you okay? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so I leave you the floor to speak.
Thank you very much. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do. And we hear you as well.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So this is a presentation dealing with the project we have called the PALOMEX project, because it was funded by the PALOMEX group from the Mistral project regarding the Mediterranean environment. And PALOMEX is a program dealing especially for paleo environment and the neolithization of the Mediterranean area. So we are a bunch of group, including Benoit Godou, who was the presenter of the previous session. And we have also Zenit Arnejo, Paul Banvart, who have presented different things during this GamaDays. So the title of my presentation is Landscape, Vegetation, and Resource Modeling. So I am presenting, let's say, an on-the-run project, which is not achieved at all, but I think you are all used to that. That we try to build the pre-Neolithic Roussillon territory of France. What does that mean? The idea is that we would like to settle Neolithic farmers' agents coming for the first time on the Languedoc-Roussillon area, which is one of the two provinces in France being on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. So before farmers settling on the territory, let's build the landscape of it. So the idea behind that is to combine climate, let's say all the accessibility to water of the vegetation and the vegetation itself in a system that could be dynamic, meaning that because the requirement we have is to settle the environment for a long-term basis, meaning at least 800 years, 700 years, 1,000 years. And climate did change all along the time. So the idea behind that is to build a vegetation system that can evolve accordingly with climate, water accessibility, and let's say local climate, soil, water availability evolution all along the territory of the area. Because there's a lot of pixels. I mean, Languedoc-Roussillon is big, so it's about 20,000 square kilometers. So we start on the Pyrénées-Oriental department, also nicknamed Roussillon, in the south and in the border of Spain. So first, how did we do that? The idea is to get the climate of the time, let's say the gap between the climate of the time and the climate we have now. We have access to the climate data on a special grid with rainfall and temperature that we can borrow directly for what climate. The idea is to take that on a mesh of a 1 square kilometer resolution and build a climate that looks like practically our climate. The idea is to define what is the difference between the climate for now and the climate of the past. This can be settled thanks to the reconstitution of paleoclimate on a very large mesh, meaning we know, let's say, the difference with the climate now for a period of 40 years, thanks to palynologic climate, let's say the study of pollens that can describe the difference between the climate now and the climate of the past. Combining them, and then we can have the climate of the past. And then using the elevation layer, we can adapt for each square climate, for the climate 1 square kilometer mesh, we transform that to 1 hectare resolution because of the difference of evolution within that. So thanks to that, we have the climate. Then let's build the water accessibility. Again, using the climate data as I was described before. Here is what we have done. So for now, we have a climate and a territory having water, rainfall, and temperature. So what I was about to say is the idea that it's on the run, and the idea is to connect all those modules all together, which is the final step we would like to see, at least in this decade. So the idea is taking now the elevation, we reconstitute the watershed system, all the rivers in Pyrénées-Orientales, let's say in Roussillon, thanks to different tools you can find on QGIS or ArcGIS. Combined with that, and using the water coming on from the rain, we settle the runoff. We build a fraction of water going through evapotranspiration linked to land use that will be settled in the next slide. So you have evapotranspiration, runoff, and then a water table system that will go as more or less a very simplified version of the water table systems. Considered that the idea is to consider that what's going on under the soil is a little bit inverse of what's going on the upward, in order to have differential accessibility to water table according to the elevation, meaning when you are on a plain, even if you are far from the river, in summer you have access to water table, sometimes depending on the type of plants you are. And if you are in mountain, because of the steep of the slopes, because slopes are steep, it means that you will have more difficulties to get access to the water table. And so the water availability here is a combination of direct rainfall, runoff, and accessibility to water table. Then coming back to the plant functional type system. How did we do that? The idea is we cannot build let's say a characterization of the functioning of all plants living in Languedoc-Roussillon even at that time. So the idea is first to settle what's going on there. So thanks to paleobotanist expertise of Julien Azoara in our team and Odile Perron, the idea is to define the list of the linear species in the study for the considered area. It goes quickly, sorry. Okay. And then thanks to the different flora available, European Atlas, Rameau-based flora, we are able to settle the limit of growth of those plant type, the 92 linear plants. The idea is to define if we are outside of those limits, it's too hot or it's too cold, they will not grow or they will even die. If we are in a lower limit, it means that they will be able to grow. And there's a temperature and a rainfall level on which they can grow as their best. Combining all these elements, we made a statistical analysis of the different groups to define some clusters. And we were able to define, I don't know why it goes directly on its own, but anyway, I'm sorry. Voila, this is okay. So as you can see, we found at the end 10 clusters of plants having more or less the same behavior according to the three main characteristics which was counted in the literature, meaning pH, water availability, and temperature. And we found there 10 groups, 10 clusters, each one having its own characterization. And the good point is that we can rely these clusters, statistical clusters, to real botanical groups based on their behavior, meaning that we have a group of pioneering shrubs and trees, and group of trees for the mountain, for the Mediterranean area, and so on and so on. The idea behind that is to add afterwards, so the hazards. Why? Because if we settle, the idea is that for all hectare of the outdoor territory, we will settle the 10 groups. As percentage, it means that combining temperature, the rainfall, we will have all the water coming, we will have all the water availability, the pH, and the temperature. So some groups will grow faster than the other, and the proportion of them will evolve a little bit for each time step. In the model, it goes on its own, I'm sorry. But what does that mean? That if we do not make accidents, it means that we will reach quickly, so let's say in 200 years, some more or less, a climatic forest, whatever the word climax you may hear. The point is that along the Mediterranean area, what matters a lot is accidents. So I suppose that. So the idea is then to add fires, tempest, frost, droughts, and even flood to have not only a forest, but also an evolving forest according to the accidents and the evolution of climate variability and local edaphic variable, meaning elevation, fertility, and pH and water table. So what you can see is that what we have done, we have those PFT and then we have to settle them on the territory. So as a result, we still have a lot of intricate work to do, connecting the different elements we have built. So set the rains and make them having an effect on the different PFT. Set the water table flux to have the different local evolution of hydroecological system, and set the vegetation itself evolving according to these characteristics. So it's an ongoing process, slowed down firstly because of many petty GIS steps and connecting stuff. It takes a lot of time, so we here plan to see vegetation dynamics into 2022, and maybe having our first Neolithic farmers colonizing Languedoc-Roussillon in 2023. Thank you very much. So maybe you know this place. We have here the Canigou, and we have some villages, reconstituted villages along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea between Canet and Saint-Cyprien. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So very fascinating, I would say. So thanks a lot, Mehdi. And as usual, we will have a question session at the end of these presentations, of the 4 presentations. So please use the Slack or the chat in Zoom to ask your questions, and I will try to summarize them after. So now we have Hélène Laclay. So Hélène, are you here? Yes, you're here.
Yes, I'm here.
And I can hear you. That's perfect. So are you ready to present?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So hello, everyone. My name is Hélène Laclay. I'm a second-year PhD student at INRAE, the French National Institute for Agronomic Research. And I will talk to you today about one part of my thesis work, which focused on building an agent-based model to simulate the impact of use response variability on the dairy flocks performance in a hormone-free context. So I will start by presenting to you the context of the study, why we had to build an agent-based model. And I'm going to start by telling you about hormonal treatments to induce and synchronize heat in dairy sheep farming. So those treatments were developed around the 70s to overcome seasonality of reproduction in small ruminants. There is a seasonality that exists in small ruminants, and also to facilitate product sales thanks to the grouping of lambings, and also help to the development and the progress of genetic by permitting artificial insemination, because the grouping help making artificial insemination, because in dairy sheep farming in France, the farmers don't do the insemination. It's an external organism. So grouping help organize all of that. And so basically the use of those treatments is very frequent in French dairy sheep farms, especially in the Roquefort region in south of France, you can see here, because it's a region where there is a cheese that is produced there, for those who know it, the Roquefort. And because of that, it's a region that concentrates more than half of the French dairy sheep farms, and also the majority of artificial insemination in dairy sheep farming. So hormonal treatments are a very integral part of the, I would say, conventional dairy sheep farming system in France. But the problem is that the use of those treatments is increasingly being questioned by society, mainly in terms of animal welfare, because the hormone used is an animal hormone taken from the blood of female horses. That's what the articles here are about. And also there is a criticism of the very act of injecting use with this hormone. And we have also public health matters, because we still don't know, it's still unclear where does the hormone go after it's been injected to use. Do they go into the products that we as humans eat, so the milk, the cheese, the meat, or do they go into the environment? it's still, those are still questions that haven't been really answered yet. So there's new challenges for sheep farming, which are mainly developing ways to induce and synchronize heats in the flock, and also continue to help the genetic progress, but without using hormones. So to meet those new challenges, solutions have been searched and developed experimentally. So here's one of them. It's actually the only solution that can allow right now to do artificial insemination without using hormones. I'm going to explain it very quickly because I don't have a lot of time. So basically, it's a combination of two things. One, you have to synchronize your flock, so the heats into your flock, with a technique which is called the male effect. Basically, you put a male into a group of female. It's going to trigger the ovulation, and then you're going to have a pretty good synchronization of heats. And then you combine that with a detection of the heats. Here you can see an electronic detection of it. I'm not going to detail the device, but it allows you to identify which hue is in heat and when. And thanks to that, the grouping plus the identification, you can do an artificial insemination. So it's possible to do it, but few farmers have tested this on their flocks, and others don't even want to try it because they don't know the outcome on their own dairy sheep flock performances, and also they don't know how it's going to affect their system organization. So there was a need to know the impact ex-ante of using hormone-free techniques to manage reproduction depending on the type of flocks, and also to know the impact on the whole farm organization system. So we needed to start by building a flock model that allowed us to integrate individual variability to reproduction management, because using hormone-free techniques like the Malefics, for example, rather than using a normal treatment, mean that you're going to have more space for individual variability, in our case of heat entry into your flock. Because in sheep farming system, like in any other farming, livestock farming systems, when you have a diversity of individuals, you're going to have a diversity of individual factors such as age or genetic background. And this combined with farmers' reproduction decision management is going to lead to a diversity in the heat entry in the flock and a variability of response to the management. So we had to build an agent-based model, and we chose Gamma because it's a multi-agent modeling platform, but also because it was easy for me because I'm not a coder from the start. I used to do some small code on R and a little bit on Python, but the Gamma language was really easy, I would say, for me. Not easy, but it was doable for me. And also we may imagine that later the model could evolve not to simulate not just one farm, but several farms in a defined geographic area. And we know that Gamma is pretty good for that. So we started on Gamma from the start. Now that you know why we did an agent-based model and why we chose Gamma, I'm going to describe really quickly the model. So we represented a sheep farming system where we had an hormone-free reproduction management with the use of the male effect. It was actually a flock model at the beginning. We had 3 agents, which were the farmer, who is making all of the decisions about reproduction, the ewes and the rams, which are biotechnical entities that are reproducing themselves with each other. And they belong to a bigger agent, a super agent, I don't know how to say it, but which is the sheep agent. In terms of timescale, the time step was half a day, 12 hours. One simulation is one reproduction and its lactation season, which is about 1.5 years. And the particularity of our model was that we have a detailed representation of individual reproductive process of ewes, and especially the link between the individual characteristic of ewes and the response to the male effect which is basically being in it or not. And this is represented by the probability of responding to the MAELIA effect that has been developed in the previous experimental work. The inputs are the individual characteristics of the use, still from the experimental work that was done in my unit, in my research unit, and other parameters and attributes of the model from the literature and partner projects that allowed us mainly to reproduce the management decisions of the farmers, sorry. In terms of outputs, we were looking at two types of outputs. First, dynamic outputs, which were weekly number of lambings and weekly milk production of the flock. And then punctual outputs, which were the total milk production of the flock and the total number of lambing at the end of the reproduction season. So once our model was built, we did a sensitivity analysis, still on gamma with the batch experiment. And it showed us that the outputs are quite sensitive to individual use characteristics, and especially 3 of them, which were age, body condition score, and milk production level. So based on that, we tested a bunch of flock scenarios where we changed the distribution of those 3 variables values. And then we selected 5 of them, the ones that you can see on the figure on the right. We compared them and we saw several things, but I'm just gonna focus on one result. We saw that when we do a joint increase in body condition score, age, and milk production values into the flock at the same time, we favor the number of lambings and the total milk production of the flock that we actually expected it, but we also have a better synchronization of lambings. And this is very important when we are searching for hormone-free techniques to manage reproduction. So thanks to this agent-based model, we saw that individual use characteristics, especially BCS, age, and milk production, are levels, individual levels that could be used to manage dairy sheep flock performances, especially when you're in a hormone-free context. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. And I think the questions are later.
Thank you very much, Hélène. You're right, the question will be after. So Benoit has posted the link to the Slack groups who do not hesitate in having some discussions and interactions with the presenters on Slack directly. And we have also some questions already in the chat. So we will go to the next presenter, whom I happen to know well, Mr. Kwang. So Chung-Chi Kwang from Kanto University. Are you here? I see you're connected, but okay.
Yes. Good morning. I'm here.
Okay. So is it okay for you? 10 minutes to present your research?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I let you share your slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. So sorry. Yeah. Today I would like to present our result of our study about to build an agent-based model for understanding land use adaptation in the Mekong Delta under the context of climate change. The Mekong Delta is a region will be strongly impacted by the climate change and the sea level rise. That situation raises a very hard question for the decision maker how to build the adaptation plan for climate change in different sectors, especially in agricultural activities. And we can see here the map from a previous study that shows that the salinity nutrition region is increased a lot from the past year. And under the new scenario, this situation will be termed more serious for the Delta. So a lot of previous studies show that we have to build something like dynamic adaptation pathways, because the climate change is some factor, uncertain factors. So a lot of different scenario of the climate change. So the very hard question for the people is lack of tool, and the big challenge to build that kind of dynamic adaptive plans, because we have to access and reaccess the vulnerable area for different sectors. So it's not stable, and we have to redo it every time we have the new scenario. So the objective of our study is try to answer that question by using a model we call an adaptation model, using the agent-based technique on gamma. So for the proposition in our conceptual model is shown in the figure, and here we build an existed based on a land use model with the input of socio-economic data and environmental data like climate data, temperature, precipitation, sea level rise, the soil, and the current land use map. In our model, we use the multivariate decision making, so we can simulate the land use selection for the map over the years. And based on that, we define the threshold of factor of climate, for example, the temperature and the precipitation in the dry season, to identify the exposure area for rice and for aquaculture. And based on that information, we will try to build the different adaptation strategies. And here we try to build two adaptations I will explain to you later. And with each kind of adaptation strategy, we have the land use, we call it as a land use adaptive solution, or adaptation land use adaptive map. So here is the diagram of our land use model. The main actor here is the cell farmer. It linked with each cell. A cell is a pixel in the raster map of the land use raster map, and each pixel of raster map can be linked with a land unit map. The land unit map is contained of the soil salinity, and also soil salinity, the protected protected region. Each land use type have cost and benefit data that we collected by survey in the Mekong Delta. And of course, the cell could be impacted by weather cell. With weather cell we collected with the, we are using the 4.5 RCP scenario. So the main decision making here is multivariate based on the four factors: the land suitability of each land use type based on a land unit, and the ability to convert from current land use to a new land use type, and the situation of the neighbor cells, and also the profit for doing the new land use type. So we evaluate every candidate. The candidate here is the different land use type, and the process will select the best one, the good one, the good land use type one to replace the state of the cell. So to simulate the impact of the climate change, we got data precipitation maximum. We extract the data of the precipitation of the Mekong Delta from 2015 to 2050. So we can see the trend of the precipitation in the right area is a little bit increased, but the total precipitation in the year is decreased. So that's quite a very hard question for the people who are doing aquaculture, because with the amount of water from the rain could be make very strong risk for them in their activity. Besides that, we also using the max temperature, the minimum temperature of the Mekong Delta in the dust periods. We can see here the minimum temperature increase. So that means in the right season, the temperature increase. That's linked with the extreme event in the Mekong Delta in 2016 and 2020. If you have information, it impacts a lot of for rice and crop area, because we have no fresh water for crops. And besides, of course, we have the salinity, salinity level by sea level rise scenarios. So in our model, besides simulate the land use change over the year, we also try to define the risk area. We call it exposure area of rice and swim. The rest one is the area impacted by the climate change over the year, and the green one is the crop area could be impacted in the Mekong Delta. So it will show similarly in the map and in the chart. So with the situation assess, we try to define the adaptive scenario. Here there are a lot of scenarios possible, but here we concentrate to two actors. The first one is the individual adaptation of farmers. In this case, the farmer try to reduce risk themselves by shifting or selecting the best adapted land use type. For example,
Kwang, sorry, you need to conclude now.
Yeah, thank you. Here we have two scenarios, and we try to use, but a lot of cases. Here is the number of percentage of farmer can apply the adaptive solution. We explore here different rational, different percentages here. For example, the number of people they adapt for the crops and the number of percentage of aquaculture, which with the exploring mode in gamma, we can see the rice area and also the risk area will be reduced, strongly reduced when 50% of people apply the adaptive plan. So the same way, for the support of the government for farmer, we can also explore the percentage of the farmers will be supported by the government for our culture and both for rice. And we can have a result. And here, with the model, we did the first step that try to understand and try to explore different adaptive plans. So for building policies, we think that the model would be a best way for this kind of study, and this gives us a very flexible way to test and to give a solution. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So thanks a lot for your presentation. And then we will be moving immediately to the last presentation by Gaëtan Girard. So Gaëtan, are you here?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hello. So I can hear you, and in a few seconds, yes,
You see it?
See your slides. Yeah.
Okay. Hello everyone. Today I will present the work I've been doing on my PhD in economics during under the supervision of Valérie Olivier and Geneviève Nguyen in Agir Laboratory in Toulouse. Globally, I'll start with a bit of context, presenting a bioeconomic concern and my research question, following the methodology I deployed to finish with the model and some results, mostly perspectives, considering that the model is still in construction. So first of all, context. We are positioning our work in the continuity of Georgetsu Rogan and his vision of bioeconomy, with two main economic proposals. First of all, degrowth, and second, transition from the use of fossil-based commodity to solar-based commodity, produced mainly using biomass material. The question that the bioeconomy poses is how to intensify biomass use in order to allow this transition and a more sustainable production system. In our work, we focus mainly on waste and or byproducts use. Why so? Because it is the only organic deposit stream whose use does not involve competition with food use. And so what is the use made of waste? Currently in France, all biomass byproducts find valorization. Nothing goes to the landfill unused. However, a vast majority is going to low added value valorization, so as spreading, compost, animal feed. We consider as low added value valorization way, so what I've stated, plus methanization, and as high value added valorization way, the use of biomass as raw material for industries. So here, the solution we are investigating for this transition is to intensify the use of byproducts by implementing cascading valorization. Basically, it consists of articulating several ways of valorization. The technical premises behind it is that cascading valorization shall allow a biomass stream that was once used only in low added value ways of valorization to be now used in both high and low added value ways of valorization. In order to make that happen, lots of organizational barriers have to be broken through. All of it leads to our research question, which explore the condition under which such system shall emerge. To solve this question and to have a reflection on it, we used a multi-entry methodology. The first one is a field research involving 70 interviews with actors from the system considered, that is with producers, food industry, cosmetic industry, and the waste industry. And besides it, research and development institution. The discussion with them was about their decision rules regarding byproducts and their use, but also their perception of the future and how they will behave. Plus some quantitative data regarding quantity, prices, cost, production cost, transportation costs, extra. Second, I have read literature about both theoretical and empirical data. I have casted a wide net. I've been through organization theory, economic geographic, system theory, and for the empirical data through bioeconomics, circular economy, industrial ecology. All of these are results in themselves, but they also are used to build a model that I will present. So first of all, the conceptual model is divided in 3 subsystems. The first one is the production system. It consists in production tools owned by a company distributed in space, plus material flow and what goes with it, selling and costs and quantity. This subsystem is entirely empirically based, mainly because of field research and due to the work of a chemistry laboratory here in Toulouse, l'ELCA. The second subsystem is the knowledge and information system. It describes where is information and or knowledge produced, what kind of information is produced, and where does it diffuse. Each type of organization and agent is linked to a certain type of knowledge production. So for example, producers organization produces information about fruit production, extra. Each knowledge diffuses through diverse paths, such as through geographic proximity or organizational proximity. Diffusion is also linked to interpersonal relationships that we describe here. So the trust subsystem is an interpersonal relationship system. So every actor shares a certain quality of relationship, from deep detestation to absolute faith. This trust we have to each other has a direct impact on agent behavior and the ability to collaborate or not all together. All of these subsystems work together and modify one another to create a dynamic. Production system has an effect on both knowledge and trust systems by modifying the level of trust and knowledge. Economic actors learn while producing. They also gain information on the behavior of their commercial partner. So the trust shared evolves. Trust system models model how well both other systems are lubrified. So that is like with trust, trading need less monitoring, less verification, so there is less costs. The production system is more efficient. With trust, agents learn more and quicker, so there is more transmission of information. Finally, knowledge system determines the ability of one agent to use new tools, to get involved in new business opportunities, to invest. Besides, the quality of transmitted knowledge, and if it's transmitted at all, has a great impact on the construction of a relationship and of trust. From the conceptual model to the gamma model, so here we have 3 types of agents, 1 human, 2 non-human. The human one is divided in 4 subcategories, so the 4 actors of the system. The human agents are heterogeneous. They have localization, level of trust, and level of competence. They can either invest, disinvest, choose their commercial partner, and enter, create or quit collective action regarding investments, sharing information, etc. The other two are inanimate. They have attributes that are listed here. So for now, for the dynamic of the model, and I'm going to finish the presentation soon. I'm running out of time. The model can be divided in two phases, plus an initialization phase that determine mostly the localization, trust, and competence distribution. The first phase is a routine material exchange. Basically, it is based on a speed dating style or a Parcoursup style for anyone who is familiar with the French education system. Each agent determines a list of potential commercial partners based on the criteria listed. And if two lists match, there is an exchange of material. Otherwise, there is none, and there is a new round to go. Second phase is where all the evolution happens. It's an evolutionary model, such as stated in the title. Agents are all taking up their results and the results of their close friends. Some exit because of their results. Others join collective action, invest, disinvest. So the whole production system is modified. So both are linked, as you have understood. In one way, the production system is modified, and in the other way, it's the trust and competence system which is modified, and there is performance, economic performance, which are produced. For scenario a priori, so it's yes, I finished. So it's given by actors. So I will not go in it. And then there is our objective of results, which are networks of knowledge, of production, and of trust. They are joint trajectory and evolution, and a linked economic performance for each network. And then our objectives, which is mainly to produce a typology of byproduct valuation system with each of them performance. And as a conclusion, I would like mainly to thank Patrick Talandier and Myriam Griot for the help for the building of the model and the success of my PhD work. Thank you very much, and sorry for the delay.
No, it's okay. Thanks a lot. So as you may have seen, we're running a little bit late. So I will, basically, if we want to have a break, we have 2 minutes for answering the questions. So the good news is that Mehdi is already answering all his questions in the chat. So, well, actually, we don't need maybe to have a discussion. Kwang has done almost the same, so I'm still trying. Let me check. So yeah, for Gaetan, so there is a question about the data you're collecting and the fact that you have collected a lot of data. And do you plan to use it to validate or calibrate your model?
Alors, I use it for calibrating mostly the production system that I have described. So the performance of each tool and the raw material it treated and the performance of the machine. Also the interpersonal relationship, that there is a great importance of the territory and the organization appartenance, which is confirmed besides by theoretical literature. And it is used also to validate the model, because here I was presenting so 4 scenarios that are built upon actors' discussion that we have had with them. So if our scenarios that we are creating by simulation match this scenario, maybe it's a kind of a validation. That's yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you. And there was a question for Hélène about the number of agents in your model, actually. So did you run different simulations with different numbers of agents, and do the results change in that case?
Okay, yeah, the number of agents, it's a parameter, and yeah, it does has an effect on the results. And basically, the more you have ewes in your flock, and the more you're gonna have lambings and a better, higher production of milk. So to test the scenarios of BCA's age and etc., we started from the same flock every time in order to balance that. We didn't change the flock that was the reference. We only changed the variables, body condition score, age, and individual characteristics.
Okay.
Values.
Okay, thanks. So again, we are going to close the session now. But again, if you want to continue and discuss with the presenters, please use Slack channels, which are, so you have one channel per domain of session. So here, ours is the ecology and agriculture. Okay, so do not hesitate in continuing the discussion this way. And I would like to thank the 4 presenters. So it was a really hard challenge for some of you to present in 10 minutes. So I'm really sorry for that. But it was really interesting to see the kind of same methodological questions in different setups, different continents, and different questions. So again, thanks a lot. We will have a 8-minute break, okay, a small break, coffee break for most of us. And then we have a session on, I think it's transportation, moderated by Nicolas, transportation and mobility, the first one on this theme, moderated by Nicolas. So thanks a lot, everyone, and see you in exactly 8 minutes. Bye-bye.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you live. So, my name is Nicolas Verstavel. I'm the chairman for this session. So, it's going to be the 10th session of the GamaDays, but actually the first session about transports and mobility. So, we will have 4 speakers, followed by a little panel discussion. So, I would like to take the opportunity to remind that you can interact using the Zoom chat or using the Slack chat. We got some admins on the room who are going to share the links for those who have not connected to the Slack platform yet. Please feel free to share any messages, any reaction, any questions, not only for the speakers themselves, but about the topic. Also to take the opportunity that you are actually in direct contact with the main developers from the Gamma platform to ask them anything you want to do with the platform. So it's Christmas, you can dress your wish list and taking this opportunity to share with the community what you want to do with the platform. So let's start with our first speaker. So it's going to be Tu Deng Hu, who is going to present his works entitled Mixed Traffic Agent-Based Simulation Based on Basic Curve. Tu, are you here?
Hi, Professor Nicholas. I'm here.
Good morning. Please feel free to share your screen. You have 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Tu. Currently, I'm a master's student at Hanoi University of Science and Technology. And today, it's my honor for me to give a presentation with the title Mixed Traffic Agent-Based Simulation based on Bezier curve. Okay. So my contents will contain 4 parts. First, this is the introduction. Second, it's the traffic modeling. Next is the example, and finally the conclusions and the future work. As you know, the characteristics of mixed traffic, for example, in Southeast Asia, are very different from that in Europe, where vehicles do not follow by lanes, and the majority of transportation mode is motorbike, and people there they often break the law. For example, at the intersection, they can pass the traffic light during the red time. So our objective of this model is to simulate the mixed traffic, and it should be 2D model, and it should with the focus on the small area. So it should be a microscopic simulation, and the vehicle trajectory is very complex in this scenario. So for estimating the trajectory, I suppose to use Bezier curve, and Bezier curve it has been applied successfully in a lane changing model, and this is the mathematical formula of Bezier curve, but I don't want to run into it so deeply because we don't have enough time. You can see the examples of Bezier curves in 3 pictures below. Okay, so why we need a curve to estimate the vehicle trajectory? As you see in the normal day, when a vehicle, for example, they try to pass the vehicle ahead on the road, they normally make a curve, and even at the corner, they steering to the left or the right, the trajectory is also a curve, and at the intersection as well. So in our traffic model, there are 3 types of agents. The traffic lights, they are to control the traffic flow, the vehicle, the main agents, and the road. And this is the attributes of the road. It's quite simple. So it has the width of the roads and the Boolean type, is it 2-way or 1-way? And the traffic light, it has the green, yellow, red time, and the road that it controls the direction. And it has one behavior that is to change the color during a period of time. And so this is the main agent in our model, vehicle agent. And you can see a lot of attributes. You can see in the picture on the right, vehicle agents, we have the width, length of the vehicle type, and to integrate busy curve, I produce 3 types of rectangles. You can see in the on the picture, the right, the left, and the front. Okay, so this is the diagram of the vehicle agent in one step. At first, it will observe its obstacle and define the status, whether it is on the road or at the corner or at the intersection. If it is on the road, if there's no obstacle in the front space, it will move straight and try to accelerate if it can. But if there's a obstacle in front space, it will check whether it can pass vehicle ahead. And now this is time to use a curve. If vehicle is at the intersection, it will follow the traffic light. If the light is green, it will handle the conflict at the intersection and use a curve to move through the intersection. And if vehicle agent is at the corner, it is the same to define the curve and make a turn. So how can we define a curve? We will consider the on-road situation. Actually, I create a basic curve between 4 points, and the first point will be the location of the vehicle, and the last point is the center of right or left rectangle. And next, I find 2 other points that you see in the picture. This is P1 and P2. I don't describe it too technically. And finally, I choose the inflection of the busy curve equals to 0.5. It will make the busy curve symmetric. And okay, so this is how I create a busy curve for vehicle when they try to pass vehicle ahead. If vehicle is at the corner, it also create a curve. Now it is quite a little different. At first, it will choose the start point of busy curve as the location, and the last point, so-called B, as the corresponding point of location on the next road. And the inflection of busy curve now is the inflection now depends on the angle between 2 roads. The greater the angle is, the greater the inflection. And finally, you can see in the picture on the right, this is the example of a vehicle when they try to make a turn at the corner. And finally, when vehicles at the intersection, you see in the picture on the left, there's some basic situation of mixed traffic at the intersection, and the picture on the right that I estimate a busy curve, and the blue rectangle is the conflict space, and once vehicle reach the intersection, they will choose the nearest busy curve and try to follow the busy curve And yeah, it also handle the conflict at the intersection. And this is the a video for the example of the traffic at the intersection. In that video, there are two types of vehicle. And finally, I am thinking that can our traffic model be used to VRP optimizations, that is a vehicle routing problem? Can it produce reliable data? You know, the lack of data is really a problem. And can our model produce or even traffic model produce good data for estimating some parameters like the average speed of each road, and through that we can optimize the traffic. Yeah, and that's where yeah, that's our thinking, and we need still more and more discussion. Okay, so now for conclusions, our traffic model can simulate for a variety of road structures. And in my model, I specify vehicle trajectory as a set of busy curve, and our model can be integrated to a simple road network. And in the future work, I want to develop the traffic lights for different types of roads. As you see in the video, they're just a traffic light between two-way roads. And yeah, it's quite interesting if we integrate real traffic data and we integrate, for example, we want to bring, if we want to bring Cityscope to Southeast Asia, it's quite interesting to integrate mixed traffic simulation for good visualization. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your listening.
Very much too. You're perfectly on time. So please, in the audience, feel free to ask your questions on the chat, and we are directly switching to the second speaker. So it's going to be Debjit Bhaumik with a presentation entitled Exploring the Viability of Walk Sharing in Indoor Urban Spaces. So please feel free to share your screen.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Just give me one moment. I don't understand why. Wait. Extremely sorry. Just give me one moment. Is it okay this time? Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Well, hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting my work on the topic exploring the viability of walk sharing in outdoor urban spaces. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Debjit Bhaumik, and I am a PhD student at the University of Melbourne. My interest lies in understanding human mobility patterns and decisions in urban spaces. I have had some industry experience when I worked at Jacobs as a transport planner as well. The study that I'm going to present in front of you today is based on my recent article exploring the viability of walk sharing in outdoor urban spaces that was published recently in the Computers, Environment and Urban Systems Journal. The paper was co-authored by Stefan Winter, Mark Stevenson, and Peter Wortisch, who are my PhD supervisors as well. So to understand what walk sharing is, it is essential to understand the background and the motivation that made me pursue it. So I'll start with walking. So walking is the most natural and essential mode of travel due to its higher accessibility. And walking is necessary even when the eventual goal is to avail another mode of transport. For example, walking to the car park or to the nearby bus stop. Among 18 to 24-year-old Australians, walking for transport alone accounts for 48% of physical activity. So walking has a lot of benefits as well. It has been proven to be a catalyst to better physical and mental health. And indirectly, more walking can mean less traffic congestion and less pollution, thereby making our cities more livable. But walking is not always our mode of choice. And why is that? So this is because walking can sometimes be inconvenient, such as a 5-kilometer commute on foot or a short walk in adverse weather conditions. Apart from these, walking can seem inconvenient if it is perceived as unsafe. People feel vulnerable in certain environments at certain times of the day. And this fear of criminal victimization is a major deterrent for walking, especially when it is convenient in all other aspects. Fear of crime reduces the appeal of outdoor walking. In many of the first world cities, fear of crime still has been found to significantly reduce the likelihood of outdoor walking. In Australia, 36% of people do not feel safe when they walk alone home at night. So what happens then? People under the influence of fear of crime have been known to take viable detours to avoid such seemingly fearful places. They also switch transport modes, even though there are greater travel costs involved. So it is evident that the existence of such feared places in the environment reduces walking, and as a result, reduces the benefits that we get from walking. So what could be the possible solutions? So while reviewing existing literature, I came across several methods that researchers have proposed to reduce fear of crime in pedestrians. This includes studies that identify urban design features that induce fear and propose necessary changes in street furniture. And understandably, these proposals are not budget friendly and take a significant amount of time to be implemented. Other new age approaches include safe route recommendation systems. These are inexpensive but are highly dependent on crime and proxy data, which are not always correlated with the fear of crime. And also these approaches are reactive in nature, so they are highly data dependent. So places where there is no data, so they can suffer from these drawbacks. So our research, it tries to look at this problem of fear of crime in pedestrians from a different perspective. So it is evident from the literature that people perceive walking with a companion to be safer than walking alone. It was coming up from all the statistics and the literature that people are fearful when they are walking alone at night. So absence of people nearby has been found to be the most critical factor that increases the fear of crime. Presence of people boosts natural vigilance against the likelihood of crime, thus it reduces fear of crime and improves safety and safety perception. People walk more if they have a walking companion, especially under the critical circumstances. But how can we ensure walking in company? Companionship can happen when two people are known to each other and that they are spatiotemporally close enough that walking in company is viable. For example, walking with family members from home to the nearby supermarket, or walking with a colleague from office to the nearest train station. But under most circumstances, walking with a known companion is not a viable option. So the question becomes, how can we always ensure walking in company? That is why we have proposed walk sharing. Walk sharing is a buddy service that can match people in a pairwise manner. So walk sharing has its distinct advantages over the traditional counterparts that I just discussed, given that it is more inexpensive, less data dependent, holistic, and scalable. Walk sharing exploits the spatio-temporal proximity of people, and this would ensure a walking companion, albeit unknown, and thus encourage people to choose walking over alternative modes of travel when it is viable. So more importantly, by making people walk together, walk sharing can reduce the fear of crime that results from people walking alone. So how does walk sharing work? So this is the basic walk sharing framework, or the sort of like the conceptual model. So here you can see in the figure that PI and PJ, they are two pedestrians, and they are waiting for some time in the system before they get matched. Once they get matched to each other, they start from their respective origins and walk to their advised meeting point, which is shown as MPIJ. After the meeting, they walk together and thus share their walk till the advised separation point. From the separation point, they walk alone towards their respective destinations. But there were some fundamental questions that needed to be answered before proceeding with the model development. So the first two research questions that we wanted to answer were the following. What are the possible costs of walk sharing, and what are the factors that could be critical to the viability of walk sharing? First, we investigated the costs of walk sharing. And so costs, by costs, I mean the aspects of walk sharing that could act as deterrents and can help us objectively measure the performance of walk sharing. And the four major costs were waiting time. So the person who wants to participate in walk sharing, he or she has to wait in the system for a bit of time before the system returns a successful match. And then there is walk alone distance. So of course, walk sharing involves some amount of walk alone distance, and it constitutes of the two distances, which is one walking from the origin to the meeting point, and the other distance is walking from the separation point to the destination. And then there is detour length, because since when we are walking with a companion, we have to accommodate the companion as well, and their trip as well. So their route. So there is some detour involved, which is the difference in route length when we are availing walk sharing minus the route length when we are not availing walk sharing. So the shortest route length between the origin and the destination. And then there is matching rate, which is a percentage of the population which are matched with which are successfully matched with a companion. Then coming to the factors which are critical to walk sharing, we investigated major spatio-temporal factors that could be critical, and these were pedestrian demand, which is the number of people in the system willing to avail walk sharing. Then there is a distance to companion threshold, which is the maximum spatial distance between the people getting matched. So it is essentially the search radius for companions. And then there is a distance to destination threshold, which is the maximum trip length. And then there is the maximum waiting time. So the amount of time that people are willing to wait in the system before they just give up and leave the system and just avail other modes. So after establishing the costs of walk sharing and the critical factors, we wanted to understand the nature of relationships between the costs and the critical factors. And to answer the question, we needed to develop a model, and we needed to turn our conceptual model into an agent-based model. And since agent-based models are pretty popular in this regard, we used Gamma to realize this basic walk sharing framework that we had. And agent-based simulation modeling helped us objectively measure the performance of walk sharing. And at first we used synthetic data to obtain results from our model, and then we established the proof of concept. So we fed the model with some data, and we wanted to see whether it produces the expected results, and thus we could conclude that our model is logically effective. This is a screenshot of the model inputs. You must have noticed that that all the critical factors discussed earlier are present in the dashboard. So there are a number of people, which is the pedestrian demand. Then there is it is a public transport stop search distance. So it is the distance to destination threshold. There is a Euclidean distance threshold for matchmaking. So it is basically the search radius for the pedestrians to search for a companion. And there is a lower limit and upper limit for the maximum waiting times. We first used a synthetic road network, a 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer perfect grid with edge lengths of 100 meters. We also fed this with this model with some synthetic pedestrian demand data to run our first set of simulations. Here is a video of the walk sharing model in action. If you look closely, you'll be able to notice two pedestrian agents getting matched, thus turning green. Then they walk towards their assigned meeting point, and then they walk together towards their common destination, which is a tram stop in this case. So these are some of the sample results from the sensitivity analysis that we conducted. In the top left, you can see that as the pedestrian demand increased, so the matching rate increased as well, because now the more number of people there are in the system, of course, the chances of matching are increased. In the bottom left figure, you can see that bottom left figure shows that when more pedestrians are in the system, the waiting time reduces significantly. The top right figure shows that as distance to body increases, waiting time goes down as people are now more flexible to get matched to people farther away. And the bottom right figure shows that as distance to body threshold increases, so people are more flexible to be matched with people farther away, the walk alone distance increases as well, because the meeting point is now farther away. And then we wanted to answer our final research question, which was to understand whether walk sharing will be technically viable in a real world scenario. And hence, this time we fed some real mobility data into our model. We used the University of Melbourne's Wi-Fi last seen data of 2019. So daily last seen records of devices of students and staff on campus were considered as proxy for their exits from buildings in the Parkville campus. We ran our simulations on 3 days corresponding to low, median, and high demand scenarios. We ran the model from 6 p.m. in the evening till 3 a.m. as these correspond to the popular after dark off-peak hours and hence would be critical in most cases. After analyzing the results, we observed that walk sharing produced more than acceptable values of the performance metrics and were hence technically viable, especially till midnight, and for the median and high exit count scenarios. This meant that at least for 50% of the year, walk sharing was technically viable with minor spatiotemporal costs, and the performance metrics were also acceptable till midnight for the low demand, even for the low demand scenario. To objectively measure possible safety enhancement of capacity of walk sharing, because the main objective of walk sharing is to improve the safety and safety perception of pedestrians, we defined a metric called safety index. It computes the walk alone distance saved by walk sharing and expresses it as a percentage of the shortest path length between the origin and destination of the pedestrian. In terms of safety enhancement, we observed that walk sharing was able to increase the safety perception of pedestrians in a range of 40 to 80% in almost all cases. And by all cases, I mean till midnight, and more than 60% for half of the time. And by conducting this study, it has opened new avenues of research, and future work will include understanding the community acceptance of walk sharing. And this would mean understanding the spatio-temporal preferences and social preferences of people so that we can input that into our model. And also we want to investigate whether social demographics of people play a role in the uptake of walk sharing. And all of this is being assessed using results from a survey that was conducted last year. And using the results from the survey, we wanted to calibrate our model, and we want to investigate whether walk sharing is practically viable. Regarding codes and data, we have made our Gamma model publicly available in my GitHub repository. Anyone can access that using this link. Unfortunately, the real data that we used is not publicly available, and we are not allowed to share it as well. So that's not good news, but we have I have made available some synthetic data. So if anyone wants to play with that data set, they can do that. And with this, I'll conclude my presentation, and I thank everyone for listening to me and giving me this opportunity to talk. And I'm happy to open the floor for questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Devjit. You were also perfectly on time, so thanks for that. You already have some questions on the chat, so I'll let you have a peek at it, and we go to the next speakers, and at the end of the session, we'll have a panel discussion. So next speaker is going to be Hiromitsu Hattori with the presentation entitled Development of Multi-Agent City Simulator on Gamma, which is called Massima. Okay, perfect. You have 10 minutes.
Can you see? That's right?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Okay, hello everyone. This time I'm talking about developing a gamma-based city simulator called Maxima in my laboratory and showing what my student and I are doing with the simulator. First of all, I am talking about the overview. As you know, Gamma enables us to huge-scale agent simulations. So I have tried to implement a Gamma-based simulation environment reproducing complex behavior of a city. The figure on this slide showed the overview of a research project I have submitted to the fund for big money for research. The figure shows the multi-agent simulator Maxima is used as a mirror world based on kinds of sensing data from the real world, and also simulator must be able to provide good provisions to people, stakeholders, and so on. So we have tried to improve the quality of simulation, especially for traffic systems, traffic flows, and try to use simulation as a tool to think about policies or systems for society or a city. This slide showed the system structure of Maxima. This structure is not the very accurate one at this moment. We are now trying to design an appropriate architecture of the simulator to deal with a city consisting of kinds of social systems. Yeah, we are trying to implement functions, simulation scenarios, models, and so on for these topics. This time I can talk a summary of one or two topics. Traffic is a core of city simulations. So far, we have worked on simulations for reproducing realistic traffic flow. For traffic simulations, we must assign appropriate driving route for each vehicle agent. In Maxima, vehicle agent can automatically find a reasonable driving path. It is natural to drive the shortest path to get to the destination, but when some vehicles are assigned similar origin and destination, they tend to drive on the same route. In that case, if agents are like humans, they should think about taking another path to escape from heavy traffic. So in Maxima, vehicle agents try to find the path which can achieve shorter driving time through iterations of simulations. In this case, the driving distance, in this case shown in the figure in this slide, the driving distance of path AEB is longer than ACB, but the driving time of this vehicle can be shorter since the vehicle can avoid the congestion by taking a detour. So in our simulator, it is possible to conduct driving time optimization as shown in this figure based on the process shown in this figure. The iterative process is consisting of city simulation, evaluation, and path planning. And in this process, a vehicle agent can change its driving path based on the result of a simulation. That is, if there is a potential driving path which can achieve shorter driving time, the vehicle agent can take the shorter path. However, this driving route planning process cannot always realize realistic volume of traffic flow in each region, in each road. So for improving the quality of traffic flows, we try to conduct parameter adjustment. So far, we assess the impact of origin and destinations to be assigned to vehicle agents on the quality of generated traffic flows. We think we can set an appropriate ODs to vehicle agents. The generated traffic flow can achieve the approximation of the traffic flow to that in the real world. So the process of simulation is a bit modified like this figure, and this slide shows the before and after. Without any adjustment, both narrow roads and wide roads are uniformly used. But with some adjustment, we can observe more vehicles on wider roads, and such traffic is more realistic. This is the simulation, the movie of the simulation with parameter adjustment. So for we just take a simple way of parameter adjustment, though we can, if we can find good ways of it, we can achieve quality traffic simulation. In these days, nowadays, we try to use maxima as a tool to think about policies or systems for society or city. One challenge is to assess the impact of vehicles on CO2 emission. This is a simulation of neighboring region of Tokyo metropolitan area in Japan. In this region, an outlet mall is around here, and many people living in near Tokyo, living around Tokyo, are coming to here to buy something. Then traffic becomes very heavy and the emission is increased. We are now trying to calculate the amount of emission and assess the impact of policies to reduce the emission on the simulator. Additionally, we are now trying to conduct simulations with electronic vehicles and calculate the amount of energy consumption. At this moment, we just implement simple EV vehicle, electronic vehicles models and some facilities such as charging stations and so on. Okay, this is a conclusion of this presentation. Presumably, at the next GamaDays, the next year, we will show the result of our challenge with maxima. And we have one serious question. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Also perfectly on time. So same here. You already have some questions on the chat. I'd let you have a look at it. And at the end of the last presentation, we will have a panel discussion. So we're switching to the last speaker. It's going to be Lu Yang with the presentation entitled Re-implementing an agent-based model for urban system in Gamma.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning. Yeah, I would like to say that this is a collaborative presentation, so I will present with my co-author. And firstly, let me share my screen. And Kun, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Hi,
that's
Nicolas.
great.
Hello.
Good to see everyone.
Yeah, let me share the screen.
Everyone has been so good with timekeeping today. Liu, we should
We should keep to it.
Perfect. You have 20 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. Can you see my screen? Is that okay?
That looks good. Shall I start then, Liu?
Okay, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us here today. As Liu said, we'll have a joint presentation between Liu and myself. Our colleague Gonzalo is on the call as well. Liu is based in China and Gonzalo in Chile, and I'm in Imperial College in London, so a global spread here. Yeah, we want to talk about our experience of using an existing model that we had implemented and applied to a number of case studies over several years, originally built in Repass Symphony. But we are now in the process of re-implementing that model in Gamma. So we wanted to share with you our experiences and rationale for this. Yeah, even share some experiences from an implementation in NetLogo. So part of this hopefully be a comparison also between these different tools and yeah, our contribution to further use of Gamma. So there's a bit of background, and I think the earlier presentations in the session showed some nice context for this all too, at different levels of decision making in transport. But if we zoom out, as saying, agent-based models of a city allow us to use a synthetic population of a synthetic environment to look at different land use planning scenarios, different networks for transport or energy, population changes, the behavior in them. So really consider cities as socio-technical systems to model the physical infrastructure, to model the behavior, and then to explore different scenarios to give decision support on policies, on behavior change, on investments in operational control, etc. So to support this, we're hoping to have a model that can be applied to different case studies and that also new modelers can use, and that includes master students and people who are not typically from a modeling background, but who would use these models and apply them in case studies relevant to their studies, such as Sustainable Energy Futures course at Imperial and urban planning and transport-oriented design planning at Nanjing. So we have some requirements for a model. We want it to be simple so that we can use it for education and student projects. But at the same time, also you have that as a foundation for larger scale research council projects that we've been working on. Then the model should capture some metrics around the use of transport network in particular, since this is the transport session, but could also include energy or other resources, as we'll see in a number of the case studies. And then we wanted a model that can be configured mostly with spatial data, so that non-modelers like urban planners can use their favorite tools, use GIS files, AutoCAD files, and configure a model from the spatial data and to generate a synthetic population for a given layout. So we have applied this to this approach to a number of case studies. I wanted to give you a very brief history of that from the last almost a decade, I think. And afterwards, Liu will take over and talk about the Gamma model. So here we have a little bit on Repass. So we used Repass Symphony for this work, started from Nick Mallison at Leeds, his Repass City model, which some of you may have come across. An open source implementation of a model where you can load a GIS shapefile of a city of buildings and a road network, and then have agents move around. He used it originally for crime and looking at burglars and safety. But then we had some students at Imperial and myself and colleagues who then used that as a foundation for an electric vehicle model to have electric vehicles driving around. But we applied that in a large number of case studies. And again, I'll show a few examples of that in the next couple of minutes. For each of these model applications, sorry, Liu, if you could go back one.
Sorry.
Like we had to add the relevant spatial data, the land use, the layout of the area, the use of the buildings or areas, networks and population data that would typically come from QGIS shapefiles. But then, as always, you need to implement some of the behavior of the agents, in this case in Java, in Repas, and that includes activity schedules or smart charging behavior and preferences, if you're looking at an EV case study. In addition to implementing those rules, you'd also have to dive into the code to implement further data collection, to track relevant data and export that so that you could process that afterwards. So what typically was done, and we'll show you in a second, how we use GitHub for tracking this, is that each of these people, and I think there's a few people overlapping, but easily some 30, maybe to 40 people who've been involved in various projects and implementations of this, that we would often add on top of existing works to make the model more widely applicable to further scenarios, but also, we ran into some limitations as a result of that. So on the next slide, you'll see a snapshot, which I think anybody working with version control and software development will be a bit shocked, perhaps, because we ended up with a lot of parallel branches here, with often difficulties merging things back into a master. So we'd have several ongoing projects at the same time, some large-scale research projects, some small projects that students would work on. And we'd start from a same point, but then keep building on that. And as you'll see, it's not ideal, and part of our motivation to revisit this. This was one of the first models that we worked on, an electric vehicle model where stars are EVs, and you'd look at the state of charge as these vehicles move around a part of London as part of an activity schedule, and we would then see what their state of charge is and the impact of that on the electricity grid. Then when we had this model, then next we could see that if we'd have vehicles moving around and people moving around, then on the next slide, please, Leo, we thought that also if somebody is at home because they drove home as part of their activities, then we could get some insights also in their other energy demands for using electricity and heat. So here we had a master student looking at a district at more detail rather than the whole neighborhood, zooming in on individual buildings, and then using that same framework that we used for the EVs to see when people are in their house, and then adding characteristics of the buildings, the energy efficiency of the buildings, and then to understand the energy density and the potential for meeting some of those demands from district heating. Then we thought, instead of just cars and energy, we could look at also the quality of the space and walkability, similar to what we heard earlier, perhaps in this session. And an architecture and urban planning student, supported by TU Berlin and London Met University, along with several colleagues, explored some of their designs with our model, and then get some statistics on how walkable this neighborhood was. Then next, really scaling that up and looking at a city region. This is Greater Accra metropolitan area. Yeah, I think we may not have time for the video, to be honest. I think I'll post a link afterwards. That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just to show that, at a much larger scale, we could simulate the development of an area, the socio-demographic changes as people move into the city over several decades. Then, as part of people's mobility for commuting, we would also then look at, in this case, at the water and sanitation demands, focusing on decision support for investing in the water infrastructure. So here the demands were that the agents had as part of their activity schedules were for a demand for drinking water and generating wastewater. And this was a large scale project linking the agent-based model with optimization tools applied in Ghana with local stakeholders, and became a very large project. So before I hand over to Liu, a quick detour, because at this point our model had become so big that when a new student came in and wanted to do a case study on a theme that we'd explored before, like electric vehicles, it started to get complex, and the learning curve was really quite steep, as I think Liu will confirm in a minute, because she was one of those users too. So for a new project, we thought we'd implement that model with the student in NetLogo and have vehicles moving around and assessing the impact of that movement and uptake of electric vehicles over time on the local electricity grid. So simulating, again, activity patterns from land use, from population details, from a road network, from access to charging infrastructure, to activity patterns of the agents, and assess the impact over time. So then back to RePAS briefly before we move on to the Gamma implementation. Yeah, this was a project that Liu did for her PhD, and she picked up the RePAS Symphony model and applied it to a case study in Beijing, and that is part of where we then decided to swap over to Gamma. So, Liu, if you'd take it from here.
Okay.
I'll be around to answer questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I was the last user of this very big and complex model developed in Java. And in my PhD project, dating back to 2016, it's the first time I get to know the agent-based model and also the smart city model. And in that project, I used this model and applied it to urban planning discourse. In this case study in Beijing, I used this model to simulate the traffic in Beijing. And then I calculate the air pollution. And here the case is NOx, quite similar to our previous presenter. He is also working on air quality, traffic-related air pollution. So in this case study, I used the previous model into simulating travel behavior in cities. It was nearly a 3-year project, and during that experience, I came across some difficulties because I was dating back to 4 years ago. I was a non-modeler, and I totally have no idea of how to programming. So for me, it was hard to get to know the program and the code. But I'm very grateful for my supervisor Kun to guide me. But here are some difficulties in the old model. Firstly, because it's a very complex one and a lot of developers get involved. So it's hard to get understanding of the architecture of the model for a new beginner. And then the syntax rules, which is based on Java, it is a little bit complex and not very intuitive for non-modelers. And also I found there is a gap of urban design and multi-mode transform modeling there. So based on this, I move on. I finished my PhD firstly, and then move on to Southeast University in China and began my postdoc research here. So then I had a discussion with Kun and Gonzalo. Should we re-implement the model in Gamma? Why we re-implement this? Firstly, I get some tasks about teaching and doing research in the School of Architecture. And when I was doing teaching and doing my research, I find that there is a desire to simplify the code and to make it more accessible. And then as for designers and non-modelers, we need to use a more intuitive programming language especially for teaching purposes, and also to improve the computational performance to run much larger number of agents. That is quite useful, especially for urban planning projects. And also for there is quite a necessity to have higher quality visualizations, because we are designers, and usually designers ask for high quality visualizations to present their designs. So based on these requirements, we then design the functions, the main functions in this model. Firstly, we need to load land use, buildings, point of interest maps into the model to generate or OD metrics. And also we need to load a road network to let agents to move around. And this here, especially we want to model multi-mode transport. So different road networks would be loaded. And then to generate a synthetic population based on the distribution of the different OD metrics and based on the road network. And finally, to simulate the simple activity-based behavior rules, so that will generate journeys within the city. So these are the key functions we are asked for in this new model. And then a little bit methodology of the smart city model, which was also used as a basic architecture in the Gamma model. Firstly, to generate a synthetic population, as you can see on the left-hand side, we firstly generate a synthetic population based on the spatial and the social demographic data to generate an agent factory. And then these, based on this synthetic population, we also link this population to the environment, to the physical environment. So this on the right-hand side is the architecture of linking G-spaced data files to the synthetic population. And then we generate the agent's activity behaviors to let them to move around in the city. And Gonzalo may give you more details later about this model. Following this, we then started to design a new model in Gamma. Because our purpose is for teaching, especially in urban designing and planning discourses. So there are some new requirements in this model. Firstly, the travel mode choice behavior is now more sophisticated, and agents can decide different travel modes. Another thing is the destination choice behavior, because in this urban design scale, and the decision of different destinations will depend on the quality of environments, for example, and also it will depend on the microclimate, for example. And the third thing is the pedestrian modeling. In our previous model, this part is missing. So in the Gamma model, we are now exploring this. And also some old functions will also be kept. For example, the energy demand modeling. This part will also be included in the new Gamma model. We want to see, for example, the electric cars charging in public spaces, but this is still in the design stage. And on the right-hand side is a case study we've developed in Nanjing city. This is in China, and this is a master course in the Southeast University. And my master students, I show them the visualization and to guide their designs to test the different scenarios. Some initial findings and our concluding remarks. Some lessons we've learned in this experience, this precious experience with model development and application in a wide range of case studies. We find that it allows us to evaluate what was important. And for example, the easy data input is very important. And it also helps us to figure out what worked really well. For example, the trees input and the synthetic population, and also the animation. But we also found that too many branches without oversight means valuable work can get lost. So yeah, we need to redesign. When we re-implementing the model in a new programming language, it forced us to redesign the existing model and to add more, to revise some algorithms even. For example, when in the Gamma model, I revised the shortest path algorithm to try to use A star, for example. And also NetLogo is still useful for teaching ABM to non-modelers. And we found that Gamma is tested to be a valuable tool for teaching among urban designers and planners. But there are some challenges here. For example, I want to discuss with you, all of you, more in detail in the discussion panel, how to build different modules and arrange them in a hierarchical way in Gamma. This is not very clear for us, but this is easy in Java. And we still have less knowledge about some advanced functions. For example, the advanced function of advanced driving skill. The background logic is still not very clear. For example, when sometimes I try to change the speed, I don't know exactly how does it work. So there are some challenges for us, and also some uncertainties. For example, if we want to share our model in the future on Gamma or Open ABM, what kind of model is needed? And here are some future work. I will not go into detail. And finally, we would like to acknowledge, especially Dr. Patrick, for his assistance in answering me many questions. And thank you very much.
Very much for this presentation. It's really, really much appreciated to have feedback from people which are switching to the platform and giving us details about what they try to do with it and what are their difficulties. So we really much appreciated feedback. You have a couple of questions on the Zoom chat. I'll give you a little bit of time to have a look at it. Some of them are a little bit technical, so they might be answered in parallel. First of all, I would like to thank you, all the 4 speakers, for this session. It's really interesting to see that people are using the platform in some kind of things, in some similar perspectives, meaning that we are all looking at the city or looking at the mobility, but with some different kind of interest. And it's really interesting to see how the platform helps you to really focus on what you want to do. Maybe one of the first questions, and it might be the more difficult one, but some of the questions in the chat have asked, can we apply this model to my city? Because we know that there are some cultural differences between people who are driving in France, people who are driving in Japan, people who are working in France, and people who are working in Australia. So maybe I can ask all of the speakers, what do you think is really different with your approach? Meaning, what cultural difference is there in your model that might be difficult to apply in another country? So maybe let's start with 2. You modeled a traffic simulation for Vietnam. So I know that in Vietnam you got a lot of unstructured traffic, meaning that people are not driving in the same line. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the cultural simulation play a crucial role. And even me, I build the behavior depends on what I observe in normal days and what the behavior of Vietnamese drivers. So I think if we want to apply a traffic model to different countries, we need to change a little bit.
Yeah, and what part specifically would change with your model?
I think the behavior of past vehicle and even how they try to avoid the collisions, and how can follow the traffic regulations.
Thank you. I have same question for you, Devjit. There was a lot of chat about the matching criteria and the test you've made on Melbourne. So I've lived in Australia, so I know a little bit Melbourne, and it's one of the most European cities in Australia. So you got a lot of pathway, a lot of bicycle ways. It's not the same thing in the other cities in Australia. So do you think that your model can be applied in every city, or do you have some specificities for that?
In the model that I presented here, it is actually not a calibrated one, so it is really transferable. But the one that I have worked on recently, and that is of course a working paper right now, so it includes a lot of inputs from the survey, so that I had mentioned in the future work section. And there would be a lot of cultural differences if you go from country to country. So that survey was entirely based in Australia. Because of the challenges of COVID-19, we had to conduct it online, so a lot of semantics maybe we are missing. But yes, I think the cultural approaches, so preferences of people would change from country to country. So where I think in Australia maybe people would like to wait for a bit longer, um, uh, in an Asian country that may not be the case. And there could be other differences as well. People in uh, less developed countries, they could be less fearful because they are accustomed to, I think, they have greater how can I put it? They are accustomed to more fearful places from their childhood. So I think everything is about a perspective and how people perceive it. But here also in less populated cities, it gets sparsely populated really quickly. So there are cultural differences, but it was hard to find it out from my survey because it was entirely based in Australia. But yeah, I think. And regarding the matching criteria, if you were you asking a question about that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the matching was a heuristic based method. So as soon as the agents agents were assigned a starting time. So, and as soon as that time step arrived at the time when the agents wanted to start walking, they would be assigned inside a matching pool. And so we would construct a distance matrix, and that distance would be the spatial distance between agent number one to all the other agents. And then we would proceed in like from the smaller one to the larger one, so yeah, in an ascending order. And thus the matches were actually made. It is not optimized, but it is a heuristic approach. We are looking to apply some optimizations to that as well. Yeah.
Thanks. Leon Cohen, same question for you. You've got some question on the chat about synthetic population, and related to that is the fact that you apply a model on a specific country. So or you think you can deal with that?
Part of it is the data side. We looked at a scenarii population with activity patterns that determine when they might be driving and to what kind of destination. So we looked at time use surveys as part of the input. So the model in London and in Beijing would have maybe been the same in the rules, but then the timing related to that would be particularly adjusted. Of course, if we were to go into more detailed behavior on how say pedestrians would act in a public space, we probably have to make more fundamental changes in the model. But if it's setting origin and destinations and departure times, we found that time use surveys were a good starting point, and we had detailed ones in Beijing as well as in the UK that could feed in. So possibly some of the data aspects could from just a technical point of view, interesting too, because you'd set up a model for, say, statistical zones in the UK, but then that doesn't automatically translate to another country. So the spatial building blocks might be different in different contexts as well. But mostly, yeah, getting good local data was key here.
And I would want to add something. I'm trying to check all the questions, and there are some questions regarding mode choice model. So I think another challenge is the mode choice model for if you want to transform this model to other cities, because the current in the current Gamma model we use a simple mode choice model, but there are some differences between different countries, and we use the survey data in China to see to decide the parameters, for example. But I think if you want to try to apply to other cities, these parameters and the survey need to be updated at least. That's just to add some comments.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask the same question to Hiromitsu. Might be a little bit harder for you. You have a full integrated model about how people are moving in Japan and how public policies are applied. Same question, do you think that part of your model can be applied to other countries? Or do you think that there will be some things to change?
Yeah, actually, yeah, of course, it is difficult to apply the model developed for Japan to other countries. So actually, in my simulation, I used a model based on typical with a typical element, and there's no at this moment there's no culture dependent element in the model. So so I don't at this moment I don't think how to apply my model, behavior model or route planning model apply to other countries and cities. But,
Okay, and so there was a question on the chat from Benoit. He was asking if we can make an attempt to have a unified model, a unified meta model of a city with an implementation of only what we need to change from the input data. So it's basically the idea, could we make of Gamma some kind of city simulation platform where you can just pick your data from your town, pick your data from your country, and then press a play button and play with your simulation. So any of the speakers want to react to that? Maybe let's start with Cohen. Would you like to have a tool such as the one described by Benoit?
Sorry, I was just typing an answer to a question in the chat. So could you repeat the question, Nicholas?
Would it be good?
It's about the generate. Yeah, I think that is the one of our aim in this model development, to make it more general, not quite based on a case study. So if I try to answer this question, is yes, we are attempting to do this. And so I think in order to achieve this this purpose, the model, the starting point is a simplified one and not quite complex, and use some general algorithms, not to, yeah.
I think the modular approach there, to just what I was typing as rather to Jean-Francois, a modular approach where you can take things in and out, I think would be preferable. But in practice, of course, it's not always as easy to implement, but having well-defined interfaces between the components of the model would allow that to work and would allow that to be applied in different settings and to make things more complex or simpler depending on the need. So I think that really is the way forward. But yeah, we probably need to talk maybe also as a community of modelers on good software interfaces and designing the data structures around that, so that you can link models more easily and reuse components of models more easily. Takes some coordination, but it sounds to me like that's really worth a try.
Alexei is raising his hand, so yes, Alexei. You got an echo on your side. No. No, sorry, Alexei, you got a bug on your side. I'm hearing myself in echo and in loop. So it's some kind of music. So just maybe to give you some time to find what is happening. We got some question on the chat about data and validation. So we have also 2 sessions this afternoon with the other speakers. We will have opportunity to give a little bit of chat about that. And we also had questions relative to all your presentation about the end users and how you are going to give them interaction with your model and what kind of information you give to the end users about the model. But we actually have a roundtable just after about that. So let's keep them for the end. And maybe I would like to take the opportunity to have feedback from you, to ask a question to all the speakers. According to your own experience with the platform, is there anything that is currently missing in Gamma in terms of modelization of city, modelization of traffic and mobility? Anything we can improve? So maybe let's start with 2.
You mean improve the plugin in Gamma?
Did you find anything missing in Gamma in terms of tools, visualization, models? Or was
no.
it easy?
I have no idea.
Okay, same question for Devjit. Anything missing in Gamma or that could have helped you to design your simulation?
Yeah, it is it's going over the top of my head right now. So I think I'll take some time to think about it and maybe put it somewhere. Nothing is coming to my head right now. Sorry.
Robitsu, same question. Did you find anything missing regarding traffic simulation modelization? Or was it relatively easy to use the platform?
Sorry, now I have no idea.
And same question for Liu and Cohen. So
I do have some questions. I prepared them beforehand and I also presented in the presentation. I think I have 2 questions actually. Firstly, about the architecture of the model and how to make to use different modules and to make the model not just a very long coding there, and how to organize it to make it. For example, if I want to import a module, maybe because I'm a beginner of Gamma, so I don't know the function. So I just want to ask if there are some techniques to do this. And the second question is about some new skills, some advanced skills. It's hard to know the background logic. For example, how does the vehicle change their speed dynamically? And because if I don't know this, when I ran the model, there comes to a problem, and I don't know the reason. So it's a little bit difficult. Just these 2 questions. Thank you.
Interesting questions. Maybe somebody from the Gamma community want to answer? Benoit or Patrick, because Alexei has some troubles with his mic.
Just for the driving skills, it's true that we have to improve the documentation, but right now, so Duke, who is going to present this afternoon, is working on it, and he has, I think, already improved a bit the documentation, and so. But it's true, you are right. It's a bit of black box, so sometimes it's difficult to know what's happening inside. But yeah, and we have to get a better documentation, to better explain how things works. And I hope that in the future, at least for this skill, because it's one of which I am in charge, we will improve it. And for moderate, I think for me it's a bit difficult to answer, because so I'm part of many different projects with very big models, like the MAELIA project, like comparig project, and I don't have a recipe for that can be useful for all projects. I think by experience, I know how to structure models, so in different files, in different things like that. And in the future, I know some colleagues are working on co-modeling, so to couple models together, so it can be a solution. But yeah. So maybe Benoit can add something.
Thank you. Thanks.
Maybe we can put back in the chat and in the Slack session all the links to contact the community, so that if you got any technical questions or any remark at all, you can send them and just raise the issue to the community so that we can improve the platform. So time's up. We'd like to thank one again of the speakers. It was really interesting and really good to have feedback from you. Just want to make some promotion for the next roundtable. So at 1 o'clock, in 1 hour, we will have one roundtable with a really interesting question about can we trust models? So it's something really actual, current. And that's it. Once again, thanks you for all your presentation. We will having the lunch break and then see you in 1 hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.